After reading Goodnight Punpun, we all thought to ourselves, what just happened? We had read 147 chapters of the life of Punpun and his trials that he goes through in 8 years or so, but not once had I reflected on how poorly Aiko had been treated ever since the young girl had moved into the town. In this video, we will look at how Punpun led to Aiko's downfall. At the start, Aiko was a very loving girl and innocent. At this time, we hadn't known about the backstory about her abusive parents and a crazy mother she had, but rather the always happy life constantly in the early chapters. She would run around with Punpun at recess, visit him in the school's nursing room when he got hurt, and even visited the abandoned factory together when all the girls chickened out. She had done all of that for Punpun. Aiko loved him more than he could ever imagine, but his emotions had gotten the better of him in the chapters to come. Revisiting the manga had me realizing that we almost never see her voicing her emotions like Punpun had to us. We just assumed she was always okay and happy around Punpun. Once we come to terms that Punpun had lied to Aiko about going to Kagoshima and leaving her alone waiting as she was hopeless, it strikes a chord on what it really means to feel lonely. She had waited for the person she loved the most to run away with and live a happy life, but got bailed out last second. I think us readers can draw near to that, as we all have been in some vulnerable positions just like Aiko, waiting for someone to take that extra step and effort, but they never really pull through. At this time, we see the first incident that left Aiko with a little less of herself. Her smile faded along with her extroverted personality. The whole time we saw Punpun go into panic about leaving Aiko on the street alone waiting for some time for him to never show up, but truly never get the chance to understand her feelings at that moment. 2 years later, and Aiko still had that bland emotion. She never really recovered from that incident. The situation hurt Aiko way more than it did to Punpun. Few chapters go by and we find out that Aiko has moved on and now is dating Takao, who is one of the best badminton players in the school. He gives us an insight on Aiko's life after the Kagoshima incident. So during break today, I talked to her about you. I said I met an interesting guy in my club, and once I said that, her expression changed suddenly. Why is that? She wouldn't answer me when I asked her about it, and she even started crying. Tanaka always had such a sad expression. I need to do something. When reading along those lines in the manga, you can't help but feel sorry for Aiko. She still grieves over the situation that happened 2 years ago and still hasn't gotten over it. But at this time, she has feelings for Punpun and is essentially afraid to get hurt by him again. She breaks down and leaves her new boyfriend Takao, and really, it's her first time showing emotion like that in front of him. When Punpun hears this, he becomes static on the inside because at least he knows that Aiko hadn't forgotten about him. He still meant something to her, and she still had feelings for him. That was a good thing for Punpun, but a horrible thing for Aiko. Fast forward to the badminton finale, where we found out before Takao had made a bet with Punpun that if he loses the game, he would break up with Aiko, as he later found out that Punpun still has feelings for her. Spoiler alert, he doesn't win the game and his breathing issues take over, disqualifying him from the match. At the worst moment possible, Aiko goes up to Punpun and starts to share how really she felt on that day. She was all alone. She expressed how she had waited forever for him and it wasn't fair on her end. Then again, Punpun would be forced to throw away his life and his family and dreams, but Punpun had gotten a hold of himself. He felt as if he won the bet with Takao by cheating, and it wasn't fair to him. He snapped out of it and told Aiko to look after Yaguchi, as he needs you more than me. This is the second time Aiko had been let down by Punpun, a part of her gone and ripped away from her livelihood. It's not like Aiko had bad feelings for Yaguchi. She wished the best for him, but at the same time wanted to be with Punpun more than anyone. After they cleared up the situation, it felt like a weight Aiko's been carrying around had been lifted off of her shoulders, and she can start afresh with Punpun, but was let down again. Chapter 43 was the end, seeing her fade into the crowd as her feelings were being hurt again by the same person she had hoped to change. Aiko's journey underscores the painful reality of placing trust in someone who repeatedly lets you down. Despite her genuine goodwill towards Yaguchi, Aiko's heart remains steadfast, drawn towards Punpun, the object of her deepest affection. Their reconciliation briefly lifted the weight of Aiko's expectations, offering hope for a fresh start, only to be dashed once again. Aiko's unwavering willingness to forgive and hope for change speaks volumes about the depth of her love and the complexities of human relationships. Watching Aiko fade into the crowd symbolizes the silent suffering of countless individuals facing similar heartbreaks, their pain unnoticed by the world around them. Ultimately, Chapter 100 provides more insight on Aiko, as this is the second time we see her and actually have some dialogue about her. She meets Punpun in driving school, where her life has changed for the better. We assume this judging off of her telling telling Punpun that she makes a living being a model and is on the cover of magazines. We as readers get a sense of healing coming from Aiko, that she finally took some time to work on herself and be a better person. Little did we know Punpun wanted to destroy that exact person Aiko had spent years becoming. Punpun had hated Aiko for leaving him alone in this world to grow up by himself. He felt lonely and forgotten by the world. After his mother passed away, Aiko had regained her smile and confidence to roam the world free from anyone and any fear. But the worst thing she could ever do was to run into Punpun. Back home, she faced abusive issues from her mother, who seemed to get overly angry when Aiko is around and doesn't seem to slow down when it comes to the abuse. Striking Aiko's face had become common in the Tanaka household, to the point Aiko doesn't even question it anymore and puts on makeups for her photo shoot. Because of the abuse at home, Aiko would turn to the outside world for help to escape the reality at home. And it's sad that she comes across Punpun. Let's be honest. Punpun was a horrible person that stems from his environment. His tendency to inflict harm on others, like Aiko, was terrible. Aiko had spent time with Punpun to escape her mother's physical abuse at home, only to end up in the same situation outside the house. Goodnight Punpun touched lots of sensitive topics in the manga with main characters and Aiko, which she gets one of the harder hitting issues. Physical abuse is no joke, and for her to be dealing with that at home when she isn't already happy is really heartbreaking. She was a sweet, innocent child and kind of lost that growing up. Although she could have left her home and reported to Japanese officials, she still ended up caring for her mom. That isn't Aiko's character, to leave someone in the dust. What the manga does well is portray Aiko in a sense that we as readers know she's vulnerable to her environment, as it influences her emotions drastically. And by seeing Punpun and her mother, who constantly add on to her suffering, makes the reader extremely uncomfortable reading page by page, text bubble by text bubble. It's human nature to care for others' well-being. Of course, there are douchebags who don't, but majority of us tend to care for others' emotions, and when we see someone hurt, it does something to us. It moves us, whether it's an actual person, a pet, or some fictional character. Our emotions intertwine with all those things I just listed and sort of creates a bond. Moving on, Aiko visits Punpun with a black eye, and that's when it's revealed to him that Aiko gets physically assaulted at home and verbally abused. Knowing how dangerous Punpun had become after chapter 100, he marches to the Tanaka house where we see Aiko's mom. She tells her that they'll be moving to Kagoshima and she won't cause any more problems, but the mom clearly had attachment issues, as she just started to yell and throw a fit about how Aiko would amount to nothing if she left. This is when things started to get physical, and before we know it, Punpun kills Aiko's mom. After reading that chapter, I kinda just looked up at the ceiling, wondering what's next for these two. Punpun is trying to revive his promise by going to Kagoshima, but at what cost? The cost of lives and friendships? This manga isn't for the weak, but at the same time, Aiko had suffered sexual and physical abuse, and the passing of her mother, who got murdered by the love of her life, weighed heavily on her. And just like that, her smile and personality was ripped away. She still wanted to be with Punpun though, so they traveled to Kagoshima, but took a pit stop to drop off the body in the forest. The police had been on the lookout for the body and Aiko at this time, and that's when the story got darker. Punpun grew chapter by chapter more anxious and eager to flee from the police, while Aiko became too worried for him. Punpun even wanted to end his life due to the fact that he created such a trouble to protect Aiko. That's what Aiko wanted, for him to sacrifice everything and to leave it all behind. Life was exhausting, but Aiko seemed happy. She was left with Punpun, and that's all that mattered to her. They both fell asleep together at peace with each other. Finally, Aiko is at peace with herself. Punpun wakes up and finds her body strangled by the neck. He goes to the body and takes it down in such peace and with no panic. At this point, Aiko had lost everything. She couldn't live a normal life with Punpun that she had dreamt of because of her mother's death, and there was nothing simply worth living for. And that's how Aiko lost everything. If you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing. It takes a good amount of time to make these videos, and I feel like it's well worth it if you comment, like, and subscribe. It really does help out the channel.